You've been told to eat your greens, especially as you age. But what if one of the most praised vegetables on your plate could silently be increasing your stroke risk after 60? In today's video, we're diving deep into a commonly consumed healthy food that may not be so healthy for older adults. We'll unpack the science behind oxalates, vascular inflammation, and how even good foods can turn harmful if your body isn't equipped to handle them. If you're over 60, you need to hear this, because when it comes to stroke prevention, what you don't eat matters just as much as what you do. Certain vegetables contain high levels of oxalates, which can contribute to arterial calcification and stroke risk in older adults. While vegetables are widely regarded as essential components of a healthy diet, not all vegetables are created equal, especially for individuals over the age of 60. Oxalates, or oxalic acid, are naturally occurring compounds found in a wide variety of plant foods, including leafy greens like spinach, Swiss chard, beet greens, and even some nuts and seeds. While these foods may offer nutrients like folate, vitamin K, and magnesium, the high oxalate content can interfere with how the body absorbs and utilizes critical minerals, particularly calcium. Oxalates have a strong affinity for calcium ions, binding with them to form calcium oxalate crystals. These insoluble crystals can accumulate in tissues over time, most notably in the kidneys, but also in arteries, joints, and other soft tissues. For individuals in their later decades of life, whose vascular systems may already be compromised by years of metabolic stress, inflammation, or mild atherosclerosis, this can set the stage for arterial calcification, a condition in which arteries become hardened and stiff due to calcium deposits. This calcification impairs blood flow, increases blood pressure, and most concerningly elevates the risk of both ischemic and hemorrhagic strokes. As the body ages, several physiological functions begin to decline, including kidney function, digestive efficiency, and the ability to detoxify metabolic byproducts and anti-nutrients such as oxalates. The liver's detoxification pathways slow down, gut microbial diversity diminishes, and the renal system often becomes less efficient, especially in the presence of other chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or even mild dehydration. The gut microbiome, which plays a role in breaking down and neutralizing oxalates, particularly through oxalate-degrading bacteria like Oxalobacter formigen, also tends to decline in older adults. This decline means that more oxalates are absorbed through the intestinal walls and enter systemic circulation. Once in the bloodstream, these oxalates can migrate to areas of chronic inflammation or minor vascular injury, both of which are common in aging individuals, where they bind with circulating calcium and begin forming microscopic crystals that gradually harden into calcified plaques. These deposits can accumulate silently over years, slowly narrowing arteries and reducing their elasticity, making blood vessels more susceptible to rupture, clotting, or blockage. This process becomes even more insidious when combined with low magnesium levels, which are also common in people over 60. Magnesium serves as a natural calcium channel blocker. It helps regulate calcium's movement into cells and tissues, keeping it from accumulating where it doesn't belong. But if magnesium is deficient, whether from poor diet, medication interactions, or impaired absorption, calcium is more likely to migrate into arterial walls and contribute to the calcification process. Calcium is most likely to migrate at the full arterial wall and thus becomes insufficiency, where the calcification process. Furthermore, when older adults consume high oxalate vegetables daily in an attempt to eat clean or plant-based, they unknowingly overload their already sensitive systems. Juicing raw spinach or consuming green smoothies packed with beet greens and Swiss chard can seem like healthy choices on the surface, but over time, the steady influx of oxalates can trigger an inflammatory response in the vascular endothelium, the delicate inner lining of arteries and capillaries. Chronic inflammation combined with oxalate-induced mineral imbalances creates a perfect storm for atherosclerosis and stroke risk. Even worse, oxalates don't just affect arteries. Their crystal formations can deposit in brain tissue, potentially contributing to neurological degeneration, as well as in joints where they mimic the effects of gout or arthritis. For older adults who already contend with mobility issues, balance problems, or cognitive decline, Adding oxalate toxicity to the equation creates additional risk factors for injury, disability, or vascular events like stroke. It's also worth noting that the bioavailability of nutrients in high oxalate vegetables is lower than assumed. Many of the vitamins and minerals in these greens are bound up with oxalates and therefore not fully absorbed by the body, making them less beneficial than they appear on paper. Seniors often have compromised digestion or take medications that interfere with nutrient absorption, meaning their bodies may not effectively extract the very nutrients these vegetables are supposed to provide. Instead, they absorb the anti-nutrients more readily, worsening the very conditions they're trying to avoid. There's a significant gap between mainstream nutritional advice and the nuanced biochemistry of aging. While spinach and similar greens might be fine in moderation for young, healthy individuals, they can pose serious risks for those over 60, particularly if consumed daily and in raw form. Cooking these vegetables can help reduce oxalate levels, but it doesn't eliminate them completely, and repeated consumption still builds up oxalate load over time. For this reason, it's essential for older adults to be strategic, choosing lower oxalate alternatives like kale, romaine lettuce, or arugula, and focusing on mineral balance, especially calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Understanding how oxalates impact aging bodies isn't just about kidney stones anymore. It's a vascular issue, a neurological issue, and in many ways, a silent threat to longevity. After age 60, your body becomes less efficient at detoxifying anti-nutrients found in some plant foods, a shift that can quietly erode your health even when you're following what appears to be a clean diet. Many seniors embrace more plant-based meals in an effort to reduce saturated fats and cholesterol, often increasing their intake of leafy greens, legumes, grains, nuts, seeds, and vegetables. But what's rarely discussed is that these same foods often contain potent compounds known as anti-nutrients, natural defense chemicals that plants produce to protect themselves from pests, fungi, and other environmental threats. These include oxalates, phytates, lectins, tannins, and even goitrogens. While the human body is designed to handle small amounts of these compounds, aging drastically reduces your metabolic flexibility and detoxification efficiency, making it harder to clear out these substances once they enter the system. What used to be effortlessly neutralized or eliminated in your 30s and 40s now tends to linger in tissues, build up in joints, interfere with digestion, block nutrient absorption, and in some cases contribute to systemic inflammation or vascular issues. The liver, your primary detoxification organ, takes on most of this burden. It relies on a multi-phase detox process, especially phase 1 and phase 2 pathways, which require a full range of nutrients and enzymes to properly neutralize harmful compounds. But after age 60, liver enzyme production begins to slow down, mitochondrial output declines, and the liver's ability to process anti-nutrients like oxalates or lectins weakens. What's more, many seniors experience reduced stomach acid production, hypochlorhydria, which not only affects protein digestion but also alters the pH of the gut, further impairing the breakdown of plant toxins. When hydrochloric acid is low, foods are not broken down as thoroughly in the stomach, placing extra burden on the intestines and liver. This creates a cascade of stress throughout the digestive and detox systems, resulting in increased permeability of the gut lining, what some refer to as leaky gut, and subsequent migration of undigested anti-nutrients into the bloodstream. Once anti-nutrients escape into the circulatory system, the immune system tags them as foreign invaders. This immune surveillance is helpful when you're young and resilient, but in older adults, repeated exposure to these irritants can trigger chronic low-grade inflammation. Oxalates, for instance, can bind to calcium and form sharp crystals that lodge in kidneys, arteries, joints, and even brain tissue. Lectins, commonly found in beans, wheat, tomatoes, and eggplants, can irritate the gut lining and interfere with insulin signaling, leading to blood sugar instability, a dangerous setup for those already dealing with metabolic issues. Phytates, found in whole grains and seeds, are known to bind minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium, rendering them unavailable for absorption, nutrients that are already harder to maintain in aging bodies. Over time, this not only exacerbates mineral deficiencies, but also affects energy, muscle function, bone density, and cognitive health. Tannins, found in tea and certain fruits, inhibit the absorption of iron and protein, both of which are critical for aging adults at risk of sarcopenia or anemia. One of the lesser known consequences of this declining detoxification ability is the strain it places on the kidneys. As your filtration rate, GFR, declines with age, kidneys become less effective at excreting crystalline compounds like calcium, oxalate, or uric acid. Many seniors experience silent kidney stress, even without overt symptoms, because the cumulative effect of years of oxalate-heavy diets, such as daily spinach smoothies or beet salads, has already created microcrystalline deposits that impair filtration. When kidney clearance is poor, these toxins can recirculate in the body, settling into tissues that are already inflamed, damaged, or metabolically active. This sets the stage for joint pain, arterial stiffness, fatigue, and in some cases, neurological symptoms that resemble cognitive decline. Compounding the issue is the age reduction in beneficial gut bacteria. The microbiome plays an underappreciated role in breaking down anti-nutrients, especially oxalates. Species like Oxalobacter formogenes, Lactobacillus, and Bifidobacterium help degrade oxalates before they enter circulation. But these beneficial microbes are often depleted by antibiotics, acid blockers, poor diet, or simply the natural course of aging. As gut flora diminishes, the body's ability to defend itself from food-based toxins weakens. In this compromised state, even health-conscious plant foods can become problematic. A kale salad or almond-based snack that once energized the body may now quietly contribute to bloating, joint stiffness, mineral depletion, or brain fog. Over time, if unaddressed, this results in a cycle where nutrient absorption decreases while anti-nutrient exposure increases, exactly the opposite of what the aging body needs. The immune system also becomes less discriminating with age, often swinging between chronic inflammation and immune fatigue. This adds yet another layer of complexity. When immune cells become desensitized to low-level irritation caused by dietary lectins or oxalates, they may begin reacting to otherwise harmless tissues in a process known as molecular mimicry. This has been implicated in autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and even neurological disorders in older adults. If anti-nutrients are consistently consumed without being properly detoxified or buffered by minerals, they act like a slow drip of inflammatory signaling that wears down the system. Spinach, while marketed as a superfood and widely praised for its high levels of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, can actually cause hidden problems in the body due to its excessive oxalate content, particularly in individuals over 60 who may already have a weakened vascular system. For decades, spinach has been synonymous with health, often promoted as a powerhouse of nutrition, loaded with iron, folate, magnesium, potassium, and phytonutrients like lutein and zeaxanthin. But what rarely makes the headlines is the sheer concentration of oxalates it contains. Oxalates, or oxalic acid, are naturally occurring compounds found in many leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and vegetables, but spinach ranks among the very highest. In the body, oxalates bind to minerals, especially calcium, to form sharp, insoluble crystals. These crystals can deposit in tissues, kidneys, arteries, joints, and even the brain. While a younger, metabolically resilient person may tolerate occasional high oxalate foods without consequence, aging bodies are far less efficient at clearing these compounds, making them more vulnerable to the downstream effects of chronic oxalate exposure. The vascular system, which includes arteries, veins, and capillaries, is particularly sensitive to oxalate accumulation in the later decades of life. After age 60, blood vessels begin to lose their elasticity due to natural collagen degradation, oxidative stress, and low-grade inflammation, factors that accelerate if there's insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome in the background. When high oxalate foods like spinach are consumed regularly, the resulting oxalate crystals can latch onto calcium and settle in the arterial walls, contributing to calcification. This calcification doesn't just harden the arteries, it narrows them, restricts blood flow, increases blood pressure, and elevates the risk of stroke and heart disease. For those already dealing with arterial plaque or microvascular damage, common in diabetics, hypertensives, or individuals recovering from cardiovascular events, this oxidative burden becomes a silent daily assault on the body's vascular resilience. Beyond the vascular system, oxalates interfere with mineral bioavailability in ways that are subtle but significant over time. In the case of spinach, the calcium it contains is often touted as beneficial for bones and muscles. Yet, ironically, very little of it is bioavailable due to the oxalates binding it in the gut. This means the calcium passes through the digestive tract unabsorbed, while the oxalates themselves can enter the bloodstream and circulate to various tissues. Over time, this not only depletes available calcium for key functions like nerve signaling and muscle contraction, but also increases the risk of oxalate-induced tissue damage elsewhere in the body. For seniors trying to maintain muscle mass, joint function, and bone density, relying on spinach as a calcium or magnesium source may be counterproductive without knowing how to counteract its anti-nutrient content. The kidneys bear a heavy burden from the constant filtering of oxalate crystals. In younger individuals with healthy kidney function, occasional exposure is unlikely to pose a problem. But in older adults, especially those with reduced glomerular filtration rate, GFR, the kidneys can become overwhelmed. Tiny oxalate crystals begin to form, accumulate, and cluster into larger stones or embed in kidney tissue, causing microtrauma that may go unnoticed until symptoms manifest. Some people experience no pain, only fatigue, edema, or blood pressure fluctuations. Others may suffer from recurrent kidney stones or urinary tract infections. What's rarely considered is that spinach-heavy diets, in the name of eating clean, may actually be the underlying factor in this slow degradation of renal function. But the dangers of oxalates extend beyond physical tissues. They can also interfere with mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of your cells, responsible for producing ATP, your body's primary source of energy. Oxalates, when they accumulate, can disrupt mitochondrial respiration by increasing oxidative stress and reducing the efficiency of energy production. This can contribute to fatigue, brain fog, poor muscle recovery, and even neurodegenerative issues in the elderly. Spinach may be rich in antioxidants like quercetin and flavonoids, but if the oxalate load from daily consumption outweighs the benefits, the net impact may be a subtle but steady decline in cellular vitality, particularly in energy-intensive organs like the brain and heart. Gut health is another critical area where oxalates from spinach create disruption. A well-balanced gut microbiome plays an important role in mitigating oxalate toxicity. Certain beneficial bacteria, such as Oxalobacter formigenes, specialize in breaking down oxalates before they enter systemic circulation. However, these bacteria are often diminished in older adults, either due to past antibiotic use, low fiber diets, or age dysbiosis. This microbial depletion means that even moderate oxalate intake can lead to higher systemic absorption. For individuals with leaky gut, a condition common in seniors due to chronic inflammation and poor digestion, oxalates may bypass normal digestive channels entirely, penetrating the bloodstream and depositing in tissues, joints, and organs. Over time, this contributes to inflammatory conditions, stiffness, or inexplicable pain that is often misattributed to just aging. Ironically, many seniors turn to spinach for its presumed high iron content, especially women concerned about anemia. However, spinach contains non-heme iron, which is poorly absorbed compared to the heme iron found in animal foods. Furthermore, the oxalates in spinach actually inhibit iron absorption even more. This creates a nutritional trap. Eating spinach with the intent of boosting iron levels may actually make the deficiency worse. For individuals already struggling with low hemoglobin, fatigue, or immune weakness, the problem may not be that they aren't eating iron-rich foods. It may be that the foods they're eating are blocking absorption altogether. Calcium oxalate crystals are not just harmless byproducts of dietary choices. They are highly reactive compounds that can silently erode vascular health from the inside out. When calcium combines with oxalate, a substance found in high oxalate foods like spinach, beets, charred almonds, and even some teas, it forms tiny, sharp, needle-like structures known as calcium oxalate crystals. These crystals are insoluble, meaning the body cannot easily dissolve or excrete them in high concentrations, especially as we age and our detoxification and elimination processes begin to slow down. Most people associate calcium oxalate with kidney stones, but its damaging effects go far beyond the kidneys. One of the lesser known and more insidious effects is the impact these crystals have on the inner lining of blood vessels, particularly in aging adults whose vascular systems are already compromised by time, inflammation, and possibly years of metabolic stress. Once calcium oxalate enters the bloodstream, especially if the gut barrier is compromised due to leaky gut or microbiome imbalance, it can begin to circulate and interact with the endothelial lining of arteries. The endothelium is a thin, delicate layer of cells that serves as a protective barrier between circulating blood and the arterial walls. It's responsible for regulating blood flow, managing blood pressure, and preventing the adhesion of inflammatory cells and harmful substances. When calcium oxalate crystals come into contact with this layer, they can act like microscopic shards of glass, causing microtears and abrasions. Over time, repeated exposure to these crystals creates a chronic inflammatory state within the vessel walls. This inflammation triggers the body's repair mechanisms, which often involve depositing more calcium and cholesterol at the site of injury, a process that initiates or accelerates the formation of atherosclerotic plaque. This plaque formation is not just a passive buildup, it becomes an active threat. As more calcium accumulates in these areas, the arteries become stiff, less elastic, and narrowed, reducing their ability to expand and contract with each heartbeat. This arterial stiffness increases systolic blood pressure and reduces perfusion to critical organs like the brain, heart, and kidneys. In the brain, especially, compromised blood flow sets the stage for ischemic events or strokes. But that's only one layer of the problem. The plaque itself, often formed in response to oxalate-induced damage, can rupture under stress or inflammation, causing blood clots that can lodge in cerebral vessels, leading to a blockage. This scenario is a common cause of ischemic stroke, particularly in older adults who may be unknowingly consuming large quantities of oxalate-rich foods in the name of clean eating. What makes this issue particularly dangerous is how silent it is. There are no immediate symptoms when calcium oxalate begins damaging the vascular system. Unlike acute infections or overt inflammation, the accumulation happens slowly, often over years or even decades. Someone might be drinking green smoothies daily, loading their meals with oxalate-dense vegetables, believing they are supporting heart health, while in reality, they're overloading their body with anti-nutrients that bind to calcium and create a cumulative toxic effect. In the absence of sufficient magnesium, vitamin K2, or proper hydration, the body has very few mechanisms to buffer this cascade. Magnesium, for instance, competes with calcium and can help reduce oxalate stone formation, but deficiency in magnesium, a widespread issue in older adults, exacerbates the problem by allowing unregulated calcium oxalate binding and deposition. Age decline in kidney function also compounds this issue. As the kidneys struggle to excrete oxalate efficiently, more of it ends up in circulation. The buildup of calcium oxalate in systemic tissues, what researchers sometimes refer to as oxalosis, can become widespread. Not only does this threaten the vascular system, but also joints, skin, and even the brain. In patients with chronic kidney disease, elevated plasma oxalate levels are associated with vascular calcification and faster progression of cardiovascular disease. But even in individuals without overt kidney issues, a high oxalate diet combined with reduced metabolic flexibility and poor nutrient intake can create a similar outcome over time. It's not about acute toxicity, it's the daily chronic exposure that wears the system down. Compounding this further is the lack of awareness around oxalate detoxification pathways. The liver and gut both play a role in mitigating oxalate burden, but if either system is impaired, the load on the vasculature increases. A well-permulating gut microbiome, particularly with the presence of Oxalobacter formigenes, helps break down oxalates before they reach systemic circulation. Unfortunately, this microbe is often depleted in seniors due to antibiotic use, processed foods, and general aging of the gut ecosystem. Without this natural protection, the body absorbs more oxalates than it can handle, and these compounds can cross the intestinal wall, enter the bloodstream, and contribute to vascular damage and systemic inflammation. There's also a nutritional irony in play. Calcium itself, when consumed through natural food sources in appropriate ratios with magnesium, vitamin D, and K2, is protective of arteries. But when bound to oxalates and deposited in arterial walls, it becomes the very opposite: destructive, inflammatory, and age accelerating. The form, source, and context of calcium make all the difference. Unfortunately, many well-intentioned dietary habits after age 60, including spinach salads, almond-based foods, and raw beet juices, deliver massive doses of oxalates without the counterbalancing nutrients that keep them in check. And over time, this biochemical imbalance sets the stage for calcified arteries, narrowed vessels, and ultimately an increased risk of stroke, especially in those already predisposed due to genetics, lifestyle, or medical history. Oxalate damage doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is profoundly influenced by the metabolic state of the individual. In fact, the more compromised your internal biochemistry is, the more vulnerable you become to oxalate toxicity and its far-reaching consequences. The major risk factors: insulin resistance, impaired kidney function, and magnesium deficiency greatly heighten your susceptibility to oxalate accumulation and its damaging effects on tissues, particularly the vascular system, joints, and kidneys. These are not isolated conditions. They're interconnected, often coexisting in individuals over the age of 60, creating a perfect storm for oxalate retention, crystal formation, and long-term harm. Let's begin with insulin resistance, a silent epidemic, especially among aging adults. Insulin resistance affects how well your cells respond to the hormone insulin, which governs glucose metabolism, fat storage, and protein synthesis. But it also affects mineral regulation and systemic inflammation, both of which play into the oxalate equation. When your cells become resistant to insulin, several downstream effects occur that worsen oxalate toxicity. First, insulin resistance promotes metabolic acidosis, which reduces the solubility of oxalate in the blood and urine, leading to higher oxalate retention. Second, it affects the kidney's ability to excrete waste efficiently. Now, the kidneys rely on a stable insulin-glucose balance to maintain filtration and detoxification processes. In an insulin-resistant body, kidneys struggle to keep up with this load, which results in a gradual buildup of oxalate in the bloodstream and tissues. In other words, insulin resistance reduces your body's ability to eliminate oxalate and increases the likelihood of it being deposited in dangerous places like blood vessels, joints, and organs. Insulin resistance is also tightly connected to low magnesium levels, another major factor in oxalate damage. Magnesium is a vital mineral involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, many of which regulate calcium and oxalate metabolism. In a healthy system, magnesium competes with calcium for absorption and cellular activity. This competition is protective. It prevents excess calcium from binding with oxalate and forming harmful crystals. But when magnesium is deficient, calcium becomes dominant and more calcium oxalate crystals are formed. These crystals are sharp, insoluble, and highly inflammatory. Over time, they can accumulate in kidney tubules, leading to nephrocalcinosis, calcification of the kidneys, or lodge in arterial walls, contributing to vascular stiffening, atherosclerosis, and eventually stroke or cardiovascular events. What makes magnesium deficiency so insidious is that it's rarely diagnosed until it's severe. Blood tests don't reflect intracellular magnesium levels, and symptoms like fatigue, muscle cramps, or irritability are often brushed off as normal aging, when in fact they may be early signs of a dangerous mineral imbalance. Now, consider the impact of kidney dysfunction, even in its mildest form. The kidneys are the primary route of oxalate elimination. Every day, they filter oxalates from the blood and excrete them through urine. But when kidney function declines, which often happens quietly with age, diabetes, high blood pressure, or chronic medication use, the ability to remove oxalates diminishes. This causes systemic oxalate overload. You don't need to have full-blown kidney disease for this to be a problem. Even a slight reduction in glomerular filtration rate, GFR, something that becomes common after the age of 60, can reduce oxalate clearance significantly. As oxalates build up, they start binding to calcium in the blood, forming calcium oxalate crystals that may lodge in tissues throughout the body. What's particularly concerning is that once this process begins, it becomes self-perpetuating. The inflammation caused by oxalate crystals damages tissues, which then become sites for further crystal deposition. In the kidneys, this results in scarring and even faster decline in function. In blood vessels, it leads to calcified plaque. In joints, it mimics arthritis. And in the brain, it can compromise microvascular circulation, raising the risk of cognitive decline and stroke. To make matters worse, people with insulin resistance often consume diets high in oxalates without knowing it, loaded with so-called healthy plant foods like spinach, almonds, beets, sweet potatoes, and even certain teas. These foods may be nutritious in isolation, but when combined with an impaired metabolic state and weakened excretion capacity, they become problematic. The body can no longer handle these dietary loads of oxalate, and instead of eliminating them, it starts storing them. Worse still, insulin resistance and magnesium deficiency often go hand in hand with low vitamin B6 levels, a crucial nutrient for metabolizing glyoxylate A, precursor to oxalate. Without enough B6, the body shuttles more of this compound into oxalate production, further intensifying the toxic cycle. It's also important to understand that oxalates don't just affect the kidneys and blood vessels. They can penetrate nearly every system in the body. When systemic levels rise, oxalates can enter the brain and interfere with mitochondrial function, leading to fatigue, brain fog, and neuroinflammation. They can accumulate in the thyroid, affecting hormonal balance. They can build up in muscles and fascia, leading to chronic pain syndromes like fibromyalgia. And all of these effects become more pronounced when the foundational systems, metabolic control, mineral balance, and detoxification, are compromised, which is precisely what happens in people suffering from insulin resistance, chronic kidney stress, and magnesium depletion. This triad of vulnerabilities, metabolic, renal, and mineral, creates a compounding effect where oxalates go from being a minor dietary concern to a major health threat. What's most troubling is that many individuals who suffer from these conditions are not even aware of their oxalate burden. They're drinking green smoothies, eating raw spinach salads, snacking on almond-based treats, and sipping tea throughout the day, all while their bodies quietly accumulate these microscopic crystals that erode tissues, inflame organs, and harden arteries from the inside out. And without intervention or dietary awareness, the progression continues. Many people over the age of 60 are trying to eat clean and eat healthy by turning to nutrient-dense vegetables like spinach, kale, and beets, believing they're boosting their intake of magnesium, folate, and vitamin K. But what most don't realize is that many of these vegetables also contain high levels of anti-nutrients, especially oxalates, which can bind to these minerals and significantly reduce their bioavailability. Oxalates don't just block absorption. They can actually turn beneficial minerals into harmful crystal formations that stress the kidneys, inflame joints, and contribute to arterial calcification. This is why simply looking at the nutritional label or the food's raw nutrient content can be misleading. What matters more is whether your body can actually absorb and utilize those nutrients, and whether those foods come with hidden risks that silently damage tissues over time. Take magnesium, for example. It's one of the most critical minerals for human health, especially in aging populations. It helps regulate blood pressure, supports insulin sensitivity, maintains normal muscle and nerve function, and is essential for over 300 biochemical reactions in the body. Yet many people are magnesium deficient and try to correct this by consuming leafy greens, especially spinach, which is touted as a high magnesium food. But spinach also contains one of the highest levels of oxalates, which bind directly to magnesium and render it useless to your body. So even though spinach might have 80, 90 Gs of magnesium per cup, very little of it is actually absorbed, and a portion of it may form magnesium oxalate crystals, which can deposit in the kidneys and soft tissues. Instead of relying on oxalate-rich foods, older adults should turn to safer, more bioavailable sources of magnesium. These include foods like pumpkin seeds, avocados, wild-caught salmon, and dark chocolate with low sugar and in moderation. Even better, magnesium supplements such as magnesium glycinate, magnesium malate, or magnesium threonate offer higher absorption rates without the risks of plant anti-nutrients. These forms don't stress the digestive system, don't bind with oxalates, and are more effective at replenishing intracellular magnesium levels, especially important for people over 60 whose digestive efficiency and mineral absorption are often compromised. Next, let's talk about folate, the natural form of vitamin B9. It's crucial for red blood cell formation, DNA synthesis, and detoxification processes like methylation. Many seniors are encouraged to eat more folate-rich vegetables like beets, Swiss chard, and spinach. Again, unaware that these are also high oxalate foods. Beets, for instance, may help with nitric oxide and circulation, but they are among the top offenders for oxalate load. And while they do contain folate, much of it is inaccessible due to the very compounds that make these vegetables dangerous for people with impaired oxalate metabolism, kidney filtration issues, or poor methylation. A smarter, safer approach would be to focus on methylated folate, 5-M-, the active form of folate your body can use directly. This is especially critical for people with MTHFR gene mutations, which impair the body's ability to convert folic acid into usable folate. Instead of turning to oxalate-heavy vegetables, seniors can look for low oxalate folate sources such as pasture-raised liver in moderation, eggs, and avocado, or supplement intelligently with bioavailable 5-MTHF, which supports brain health, mood, and detoxification without the hidden risks of oxalate-induced inflammation. Now let's address vitamin K, particularly K1 and K2, which are essential for calcium regulation, bone strength, and cardiovascular health. Many people assume that getting vitamin K from kale and spinach is ideal. These vegetables are indeed rich in K1, but again, they also carry high oxalate burdens. What's more, K1 needs to be converted into K2 in the gut to help direct calcium away from arteries and into the bones. This conversion is often inefficient in older adults, especially those with a compromised gut microbiome. So even if you're eating plenty of K1-rich greens, you might not be getting the cardiovascular protection you think you are, and worse, you may be contributing to vascular calcification through calcium oxalate deposition. The better alternative here is to get vitamin K2, especially the MK7 form, which is highly bioavailable and more potent in directing calcium to where it belongs. K2 is found in foods like natto, Ada-fermented soybean product, grass-fed butter, pasture-raised eggs, and aged cheeses, all of which are naturally low in oxalates and metabolically supportive. Now, if you're not consuming enough of these foods, K2 supplements in MK4 or MK7 form can fill the gap and help prevent arterial stiffening, support healthy bones, and reduce the stroke and cardiovascular risks that often come with age. Another major issue is that many seniors are dealing with compromised digestion, lower stomach acid, and reduced bile production, all of which impair nutrient absorption. This makes it even more important to minimize anti-nutrient intake and focus on clean, efficient, and metabolically friendly sources of vitamins and minerals. It's not just about getting more nutrients, it's about getting them in a form your body can absorb and use without collateral damage. And unfortunately, popular media often fails to make the distinction between nutrient content and nutrient bioavailability, leading millions of well-meaning people to eat foods that are counterproductive to their health goals. They drink spinach smoothies for magnesium, eat beet salads for folate, and toss kale into every meal for vitamin K1, only to find themselves fatigued, inflamed, or dealing with mysterious kidney issues or joint pain down the line. This is not due to aging, it's due to a mismatch between their body's needs and the form in which those nutrients are delivered. As the body ages, it becomes more vulnerable to imbalances, nutritional, metabolic, and vascular. One of the least discussed but highly damaging imbalances is the accumulation of oxalates from certain vegetables. While oxalates are natural compounds found in plants, they can become a silent contributor to vascular degeneration, cognitive decline, and heightened stroke risk in people over 60. The reason is simple. Older bodies are less efficient at processing and detoxifying these compounds, and decades of accumulated exposure through diet can create a slow internal corrosion that often goes unnoticed until symptoms emerge: fatigue, brain fog, kidney stress, calcified arteries, joint pain, or even a major cardiovascular event. High oxalate vegetables, despite their trendy superfood status, are often at the center of this slow burn dysfunction, and reducing their intake, especially post 60, can initiate a powerful reversal in vascular inflammation, mitochondrial energy efficiency, and cerebral circulation. Spinach, beet greens, Swiss chard, and even certain nuts and seeds have been celebrated as nutrient-dense staples, yet they rank among the top in oxalate content. For someone under 30 with robust kidney filtration, a healthy gut biome, and high digestive resilience, the body might be able to buffer some of the negative effects. But for those over 60 who typically experience reduced stomach acid, weakened bile production, insulin resistance, magnesium deficiency, or undiagnosed kidney strain, these high oxalate foods can create a perfect storm inside the body. Oxalates bind to calcium, magnesium, and iron in the gut, rendering them unusable and sometimes transforming them into sharp, needle-like crystals that lodge in tissues, especially in the brain, joints, kidneys, and arterial. These crystals contribute to microinflammation, trigger autoimmune responses, and interfere with blood flow regulation, directly threatening vascular health and cognitive clarity. Vascular integrity is essential to avoiding strokes and maintaining healthy brain function. The brain is dependent on a constant, clean, oxygen-rich blood supply. But when oxalates contribute to calcium oxalate crystal formation in arterial walls, they increase arterial stiffness and reduce elasticity. This restricts blood flow, elevates blood pressure, and puts tremendous stress on an aging cardiovascular system. The problem worsens if the person is already dealing with insulin resistance or prediabetes, both of which are common post 60, and accelerate the calcification of arteries. Reducing oxalate-rich foods can immediately begin to relieve this burden. When you remove a daily spinach smoothie or kale salad and instead replace it with low oxalate, nutrient-dense alternatives like arugula, romaine, watercress, or even cooked zucchini and cauliflower, you reduce the body's oxalate load, liberate critical minerals for absorption, and decrease the formation of these destructive vascular crystals. Beyond vascular health, the reduction of dietary oxalates also plays a massive role in cognitive clarity and brain protection. Oxalate crystals have been found to accumulate in the brain, particularly in individuals with impaired detoxification pathways or mitochondrial disorders. They can inflame the brain's lymphatic system, reduce cerebrospinal fluid clearance, and interfere with the regulation of neurotransmitters. This may contribute to symptoms like depression, anxiety, poor memory, brain fog, and even neurodegenerative diseases. High oxalate diets deprive the brain of magnesium and other vital cofactors for energy production and nerve signaling. This means seniors who are unknowingly consuming healthy salads or green juices filled with oxalate-heavy ingredients may be inadvertently impairing their own focus, memory, and mood. Reducing these foods often leads to clearer thinking, improved mood stability, and better sleep, all of which support long-term brain preservation. Stroke prevention is directly tied to both vascular health and brain resilience. The root cause of most strokes, both ischemic and hemorrhagic, relates to damage in blood vessels, chronic inflammation, and unstable blood pressure. Oxalates don't just contribute to one of these issues, they impact all three. They encourage calcium deposition in blood vessels, deplete the magnesium that normally keeps blood pressure in check, and provoke inflammation through their sharp, crystalline structure when stored in tissues. Seniors with underlying kidney issues, low magnesium intake, or systemic inflammation are at much greater risk for stroke when oxalate intake remains high. Even if there are no visible symptoms, damage accumulates at the microscopic level for years. Removing or significantly cutting back on high oxalate vegetables allows the body to halt this damage, begin clearing stored oxalates, which can take months, and restore proper mineral balance. It's not just about what you remove, but also what you replace. By shifting to low oxalate vegetables and pairing them with healthy fats, clean proteins, and electrolyte-rich foods, seniors can regain vascular flexibility, support nitric oxide production for blood flow, and enhance their cellular detox pathways. Foods like pasture-raised eggs, grass-fed meats, cooked cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage, and fermented foods help heal the gut and support better oxalate clearance. Hydration plays a critical role too. Oxalates must be flushed out through the kidneys, so clean, mineral-rich water and a steady electrolyte balance become essential tools in reversing decades of silent damage caused by overexposure to plant anti-nutrients. As oxalate levels fall, tissues begin to release stored crystals, systemic inflammation drops, nutrient absorption improves, and both vascular and cognitive functions begin to rebound.